Welcome to episode 1 of Getting Good at Some Important Stuff. This is Ansh Mehra, and today we'll be learning how to make our posters look more grungy, more textured, and grittier. I have designed various styles to show you some of my most valuable tips and tricks that can include that gritty factor to your posters and add some crazy details to make your work stand apart. I'll first show you a preview of everything we'll be learning in this video and then in the end explain one by one on how you can make them. So without wasting any further time, let's get right into it. So this is the first style that we'll be covering on how you can quickly, like within 5 minutes, create such wallpapers and textures. And the same techniques can be used for your posts, your stories, your brochures and everything. And I'll tell you how you can start with a basic texture, add your own color, fix your character spacing and add some detail to your text as well. So I'll show you more variations of this. This is a version where we have a bright background with dark text on it. It is very similar to what I showed you before. And you can also play around with some gradients and colors to, get some really interesting outputs. So there is a lot that you can do within a span of 2 to 3 minutes, and it's extremely simple. All you need is some, good looking grungy dark textures, and you can get them from your house, or if you're roaming around and you see something very, cracky and grungy, then you can click a picture of it and use those textures, and I'll be teaching you how to use those textures in Photoshop. And yes, so this is variation 1. Let's get on to variation 2. So you can not only use these textures as backgrounds or text overlays, but you can also use them to add an extra touch to your overall output. So for example, this is my cover for my show. It's called Take It Easy, and I just want to make a preview out of it. So these can act as borders, and if you get more creative with it, you can actually have colored borders and some sort of a dirt spread all over your artwork. So in reality, these tiny like scratches and dust that you see has been added through these textures, and it gives it a more authentic and a much more realistic feel. And not just about putting it as an overlay, you can actually use these textures for putting extra effects like cracks all over your artwork. So you saw the previous poster, right? There was no crack, but because I had a texture which had a crackling, graphic on top of it, I could use it to make an illusion as if my poster is cracking out. Moreover, I've used the text on top of this and added more textures on top of the text, added some shadows, added some noise at the edges. So we'll be learning one by one on how you can achieve the same effects from your own textures, and it's actually very, very easy. You wouldn't even believe how easy it is. You can start with making a new document. You can do this with Command N while you open Photoshop. If you're making a poster for Instagram, make a square canvas of 1800 into 1800 pixels. If it's for a story, then 1080 into 1920. If it's for a widescreen video or thumbnail, then 1280 into 720 would be perfect. For this video, I'll be choosing 1280 into 720. You can put the dimensions here. I'll click on create. Now, if you see these guides, you can hide them by tapping Command H, Command 0 to fit your canvas to the screen. Now, the most important thing to have is a high resolution picture of a texture you can play with. You can find old walls or tiles in your house and get their pictures for making your own textures. Otherwise, I'll be talking about some really interesting texture packs in some time in this video itself. Let me just put a texture from my collection. I'll choose a concrete texture, which is kind of like light in color. Now, if you're extremely new to Photoshop, don't leave. Just watch the entire video without doing anything and understand the logic behind my decisions. You need to get rid of the fear that all of this is too complex. Watch the entire thing on fast speed. Once you're done watching this video, go to YouTube and watch some videos on basics of Photoshop. Watch at least 5 videos. When you know the basics, come back to this video. Back to the tutorial, you can actually add some really awesome color to this texture by making a new layer, choosing a dark color from the palette. I'll choose dark, red maybe. Yeah. And while having the new layer selected, press Option Delete or Alt key on the Windows keyboard. You can also use the brush tool to paint the entire canvas. What Alt or Option Delete does is it'll fill the entire canvas with the color you chose. Now comes the exciting part. If you change the blending mode from normal to multiply, you'll get a really good mix of your color with the texture. I'll rename this layer as Red Overlay. Cool. We'll create one more layer. I'll call this as Vignette. I'll show you what a vignette is. Choose black color from the palette, and I am zooming in and zooming out by using command minus and command plus, command 0 to fit it to the screen. Okay, so now I've chosen black. I have my vignette layer selected. I'll again press Option Delete. So now my entire canvas is filled with black. Choose the elliptical marquee tool. Okay, you can hold your cursor and choose it from right there. Bring your cursor to the center of your canvas. Hold the Option key and drag your cursor out like this. I can actually move it and keep it to the center. You'll make a nice elliptical selection originating from the center of your canvas. Right click, choose feather and type in 300 pixels. Do make sure that you are doing all of this on your vignette layer. Now press delete. Looks much better now. Now, I strongly advise you to play around with different colors and combinations. Here are some variations I played with from my pack of textures. You can see how colors can completely change the tone of your backdrop. You can see how the vignette plays a huge role in making things more smooth. It looks more fancier and more professional and more real to the eyes. You can also play around with gradients. Instead of filling your screen with a solid color, you can choose the gradient tool. It's right here. If you press G, you can activate it. Make sure that you've chosen the option with one color and remaining alpha. The checkbox that you see with my black color, this is 0 alpha. It means that there is nothing visible here. I'll choose something like blue, maybe dark blue. And if I use the tool and change the normal mode to multiply, and I've removed the red, now it's only the gradient. Now you can see how cool this texture looks, and I can make maybe one more layer or work on this layer itself. This is blue, maybe I'll choose something like red and, strike a gradient from this side. And you can see how I can, play around with so many combinations. You can get some really interesting combinations. So yes, now I'll remove this gradient layer for now. Let's just stick with red. Choose the text tool. Select a good font. I'm taking Proxima Nova for this, semi-bold. I'm going to make them white. And in the character panel, you can access this from window, character. In the character panel, I'm going to make sure that I have a tracking of 100. Tracking is the space in between characters. It's the character spacing. It adds some breathing space to the text. You'll understand what I'm saying. Now I'll type, let's just type written and directed by. The reason why this is coming in caps is because I have my caps lock on. Otherwise, you can use this option to keep everything on caps lock. So even if you write in normal letters, it will automatically convert it into all caps. This is for superscript, this is for subscript, italics, bold. You can play around with these options as well. There is the strike through option as well. So yes, we'll discuss this later. I'll put this in the center. I can duplicate this by going, or actually I'll show you a shortcut. Command J is to make a copy of it. Or if I press the Alt key or the Option key and drag my cursor, you can actually make a copy very quickly. On this, I will write Ansh Mehra and make it bold, or actually extra bold. And if I scale written and directed by down and scale up the Ansh Mehra, now I am, giving them proper priority. And if I select all my layers, to make sure that I have everything aligned, I'll hold the command button and select my text layers and the white background layer. Go to the top and click on the align horizontal centers option. Now make sure that your text is absolutely final. So I've clicked it. So now I know that all of it is pretty much in the center. I'll keep my text layer at the very top. Oh wait, cancel. Something happened. I'll select my text layers. Put them on the very top. Now I'll make a group of the text layers by selecting both of them together and calling the new group as hero text. I'm going to duplicate this group and right click on it and convert it to smart object. Now why I did this has a very, very simple logic attached to it. And this is where the second stage comes in. So now you've reached a checkpoint, and now we'll go on and add some textures to our text. So now that we're done making our text, making a group out of it and making a copy, converting it into a smart object, it's time to add some texture to our text as well. So what I'll do is I'll go and maybe find a grungy texture this time, not in black, but maybe something in gray. I think, yeah, this second one works pretty good. Rotate it. And so now this is where the fun part comes in. Make sure that your grid layer, I'm going to rename this as my grid layer, the new texture that I've added, it's on top of my copy, and this copy is converted into a smart object. If I right click on my grid layer and select an option which says create clipping mask, my copy layer starts behaving like a stencil for my grid. If I choose the move tool, I can move it around. So you can imagine how awesome this looks. Now I can do a lot of creative stuff here. I can add a curves adjustment to the grid by going to image adjustments, and you can see, several adjustments that you can make, but let's just choose curves. If I take the curve upwards, it'll make it more bright. If I take it downwards, it'll make it more dark. But since we have a dark background, this wouldn't work. So let's just keep it on the higher side. I'll click on OK. And you can play around with this. And there's one more thing that I want to discuss. Character spacing plays a huge role, and you can change the spacing in between your letters from the character panel. You can access this from Windows and character as well. And you should actually explore this panel. There's a lot that you can do. Your typography plays a huge role in conveying messages properly. You can see how making things bold and properly spaced out gives you much better results. Choose basic fonts and play around with their spacing and textures, and you'll be amazed at the results that you can get. Now, how do we add a shade of color to this texture? Because this texture is basically black and white. I'll make a new layer. And let's just take the simple route. Bring your cursor to the copy layer. Point it at the thumbnail of your copy layer within this window. Now hold the command key. Did you see that change? Keep holding the command key and press on the thumbnail. You'll now have a selection that outlines your text. Go to the color palette and choose your color. I think yeah, this looks good. While having the new layer selected, just press Option and delete again. Now I have a new layer, I had my color chosen, and it has filled the entire selection with the color that I chose. The reason why my texture has gone away is because this is at 100% opacity and its blending mode is normal. So it is hiding whatever there is beneath it. But if I change the blending mode from normal to multiply, now you can see this amazing combination of my color with the texture. Okay, and I'll rename this layer as color overlay. So yes, now we have a very cool text on top of a gritty dark background, and this is the second checkpoint. The third stage is adding the finer details, and this is where things become really interesting, and it is slightly more complex, but the results that you can get out of this, the kind of impact that those tiny details give you, is just invaluable. So keep watching. So now we come to using these textures as additional overlays. But now that you've understood how to use clipping masks and how to make sure that your files are looking okay and the vignette part, Now I'll just take you through the files that I've made. And these are just a few samples, but once you see these files visually, you'll understand the logic behind it. So for example, this is my poster that I made, and the actual thing that I started with was this one file. This was where I started all of this with. And when I was making this file, I did some clipping mask on Take It Easy as well. As you can see, there is some texturing going on. But I duplicated these three pictures and I aligned them together. And then I put one grungy texture in the background. Okay. Now I've set the opacity to 30% because the actual image is this. But I've set the opacity to 30%. And behind this grungy texture is a dark color. So originally the image was this, but if you reduce the opacity, now you have something which is less disturbing to the eyes. And then I have my covers on top of it. After this, I've added a vignette with a lot of feathering, and then one more vignette which is focused towards the center. How you can do this is, for the wider vignette, you choose a wider radius, have the feathering to 300. For a one which is more closely focused, you only choose a radius that ends in the center of the screen. And now you feather for 400 or 300. So now you have something which is more focused towards the center. Then I have a grungy texture which is set to color dodge. In reality, it was like this, and I've erased stuff from the middle. But if I set the blending mode from normal to color dodge, I have something which is more subtle, And on top of this, I've added some dirt. So I'll show you what the actual texture looks like. This is the actual texture. Okay. And I've set the opacity to 70%. This is the 100% opacity texture. If I've set it to 70%, go to normal. And actually you can experiment as much as you want, because once I select, say, darken, what's happening is that everything that is white is disappearing and only the dark stuff is remaining. You can see how it's working. You can see the logic. So now you can imagine what I started with. This is what we started with. And you can see the kind of change that has been, applied on top of this layer just through, 4 or 5 textures. Another variation is where I changed the colors of the edges. So I'll show you how I did that. For example, you have an image with you. This is how the borders look. And I've reduced the opacity. You can actually go to image adjustments and curves and, just play around with the reds and the greens and the blues. So for example, if I reduce the reds and reduce the greens, now I have something which is going towards the blue side. So now it looks very cold. With the red, it looks very, something dark, maybe because the red is prominent in my cover as well. That is why I chose red in the first place. But you can see how you can have some really, really good looking backdrops, because now on top of this backdrop, we can have our hero text. So this is a very exciting case study, because this is where you can add very realistic cracking effects. So I have a pack, and I think this is the right time to tell you guys, I have recently launched 3 packs. One is for grungy materials, which has 15 black and 15 gray textures. They are extremely high resolution, and the resolution is 3024 into 4032, and they can be used in hundreds of ways. The second pack is the concrete textures pack, and this also includes crack brushes that can be used in Photoshop for adding extra effects on top of your layers, and I'll cover this in a separate video. But you can YouTube how brushes work. It's a fabulous feature. So in concrete textures, you have something which is less grungy, but it has a little bit of noise attached to it. So it's not very disturbing or very dark, but it has that strength, that grit factor. So it doesn't look like a solid. The third pack is the cracked textures files, which is the one we'll be using right now, which can add very, very realistic, good looking cracks to your posters and your brochures and your videos and everything. So I'll take an example. I've opened my crack textures file here, and trust me, these are some amazing textures, and they are available at a very, very low price. You can get your own textures as well. You can go out, find textures, click, but I have made a good pack for all these textures. So you save a lot of time finding these textures. You save a lot of time buying a camera, getting pictures, editing them, finding what's right for your poster. You can save all of that effort and time and money by just directly getting this pack. So I think I'll use, let me see which one looks good. I think this one's pretty awesome. So I'll throw this on top, and if I just choose the normal mode to darken, you can see how fabulously it has applied itself on my poster. It is just so powerful. And if I duplicate it and rotate it, I can put it on the remaining images as well, and just keep it right there. And actually I'll find one more crack. Oh, this one's pretty good. Yeah, this has a more, yeah, okay, cool. So I'll take darken and put this on the side. So you can see how cool this looks. You can never ever achieve the same effect elsewhere, and that is why I have made a group of these textures, because you can't find this kind of clarity in all textures around you. So once you're done with this, you can have some black overlay on the top, and I've added some more grunge to it by using a grungy texture and putting it to darken. So now I have something cracked in the bottom. I have my stuff ready. These were the textures I added in earlier, but I think that'll get too much. Yeah. Oh yeah, this border looks pretty good. And now what I did was I added some text. So I'll show you how the text works. This is the text, and I think you understand what's happening here. First, I wrote my headline, and I think something's wrong here. Yeah, I think there was one texture move. I've put my text and I have chosen a clipping mask, and I've added shadows. And if I reduce the opacity of the black solid which is on top of my background, I can see the text more properly. So you can see how cool this looks, right? Because you can't achieve the same kind of effect, and you can see the kind of detail that's happening in the background. So yes, this is how you can use these textures. And I know there is so much that you can do, and this is not only compatible with Photoshop, it is also compatible with After Effects as well. And I've been using the same stuff for all my Instagram videos and all my posters and everything, and I have achieved some phenomenal results. And these packs are available at a very economical price right now. So you can go to the link is in the description for all these 3 packs. You can try one pack out and see if it's working out. If you don't want to buy the pack, of course, you're free to go out and find your own textures and play around and make your own posters. This was Ansh Mehra, and I'll be back very soon with a new video tutorial. Keep creating. This is the best time to make some awesome stuff. Bye bye. Take care.